Today we're releasing a new report that for the first time ever takes a comprehensive look at the New York State executive budget from the perspective of how it will impact on people of color and communities of color. Many different organizations that advocate for a specific issue or a specific constituency have come together today to urge New York State legislators to consider how the choices that they make around the budget on cuts and spending will impact on all communities of color as a whole.
Let me give you a context of what we're talking about. In New York State, 26% of the population are people of color, as compared to 20% around the nation. One of the things that makes me proud to be a New Yorker is our diversity. Now, there is no question that in New York State, poverty affects all people who are poor, white, black, yellow, red, but if you're poor, it affects you. It also, we cannot deny the fact that it disproportionately affects people of color. And the reason for that is because we have structural, historical patterns of discrimination in our country and in our state that has disenfranchised and has affected a majority of people of color who are unfortunately poor.
As you'll hear from our speakers as we go through each of the different parts of the report, on balance, the proposed budget further increases the racial and ethnic disparities in New York State that Ceci described due to its disproportionately negative impact on communities of color. For that reason, we urge the legislature to restore the cuts and to pass fair share tax reform, which would implement a modest tax increase on those wealthy New Yorkers making over $250,000 a year in order to generate the funds for budget cut restorations.
This budget will impact the people that can least afford to receive these cuts. And the fair share tax proposal is important because in the state budget there are billions and billions of dollars of incentives and tax credits that actually go to the people who already have a disproportionate amount of money in the state. Everyone says that we want to get kids off the street, right? Everyone says that. Well, this budget reduces money to get kids off the street.
We're here today to say that these cuts in the executive budget are really going to just further the achievement gap and further the racial divide, the economic divide, and the divide between immigrants and non-immigrants. We're here to say to the governor and the legislature that immigrants want to be part of the solution to our economic recovery, and that these cuts are going to really turn back the clock and helping that happen.
I want to talk a little bit about how districts that have high concentrations of students of color, how they're being impacted. In Buffalo, they're looking at laying off between 900 and 1,000 teachers and staff. In Syracuse, it's about 300, which is proportionate to Chancellor Klein's estimate of laying off about 15,000 people in New York City. And in Rochester, it's about 500. When you contrast that with a district like Pittsburgh, which is about 20 minutes outside of Rochester, you're definitely able to clearly see that the greater impact is in the districts that have higher needs, and higher concentrations of students of color. In Pittsburgh, they aren't anticipating any cuts whatsoever amongst staff or amongst teachers because of the governor's budget cuts.
Today I'm going to talk about two aspects of the budget. One that has the potential to really improve outcomes for youth of color and youth all across the state, and one part of the budget that threatens to put in danger communities of color and other communities throughout the state. Firstly, just to give you a framework of the juvenile justice system, 86% of youth in upstate facilities are African American or Latino. 95% of youth from New York City in upstate facilities with OCFS are African American or Latino. The Office of Children and Family Services is the agency that administers the juvenile jail system. Now, on the table right now in the executive budget is a plan to close or downsize 11 underutilized or empty juvenile correctional centers or evening reporting centers. This is a wonderful opportunity in a fiscal crisis to take the time to realize where our priorities are. These facilities are empty or underutilized, and we're paying $140,000 per year per bed for empty beds. Right now there's about 516 empty beds as reported by OCFS. Keeping youth closer to home and reducing the reliance on incarceration of youth of color will definitely help to treat the disproportionate minority contact in the system right now. So the proposed cuts of the juvenile correctional centers and evening reporting centers definitely has a positive impact for youth of color. However, where the budget falls very short of protecting communities of color is because of the lack of community reinvestment. Now, the budget is slated to actually save about $16.4 billion from these correctional center facility closures. That's all slated to go right back into the general fund. Yet communities need these funds desperately, as others have said, for programs that deal with youth, that give them mentoring, mental health care, family counseling, substance abuse treatment, recreational services. And the community-based programs are where you're really going to get the most bang for your buck, so to speak. They cost as little as $5,000 per year per youth, and they have recidivism rates as low as 18%. Compare that with the OCFS recidivism rate of 75%. So we really have to fight for community reinvestment in this budget and push for the closure of the facilities.
I'm a counselor at Queens College. I also run a program with paraprofessionals that want to become teachers, very often low income. Most of our students, 73% of the students at CUNY are people of color, and every time that something like this happens, where there's a threat to the budget of services that decrease, the people that are most impacted are our students, people of color.
This August makes 4 years since Hurricane Katrina ravaged the Gulf Coast region, Mississippi, and New Orleans. We all watched from television screens as we saw mostly people of color, lower income individuals, as the streets were flooded. And we characterize it, rightly so, as neglect and incompetence. And although here in New York State, our streets are not flooded with water, many urban communities are flooded with despair. And although our government might not be incompetent, we can say that our government has been neglecting communities of color, the city level, the state level, and the federal level. Urban communities, as these champions here this morning have already articulated, have been getting less money for public schools, less money for recreational opportunities, the disparities in health care. Every crucial area of community life, we receive less funding than other communities do. We're saying that we have to do something to end the despair that's flooding our neighborhoods. And part of that is government no longer neglecting those communities.